forest lies to you. It drapes itself in a veneer of tranquility. Pine needles whispering underfoot, streams gurgling like a lullaby, sunlight dappling the earth in golden patches, promising solitude, a sanctuary from the clamor of asphalt and neon. But that's a mask, a thin skin stretched over something ancient, something ravenous. Beneath its boughs, in the shadowed hollows where roots twist into the dark, it hungers, a relentless, primal appetite that doesn't merely wait for trespassers but hunts them, marking its territory with silence and slaughter. My name is Carter Malone, and for 8 years, I've walked the trails of Arkansas's Ouachita National Forest as a ranger, believing I knew its rhythms, its secrets. I was a fool. In May 2012, I stumbled into a truth that clawed apart that illusion. A presence that didn't just inhabit the woods but owned them, its violence a signature written in blood and broken bone. This isn't a ghost story for campfires or a shadow glimpsed in a storm. It's a reality etched into the earth, a terror that stalks humans with a precision that defies comprehension. And I'm not alone. Across America's wild desks, others have peered into the same abyss, their voices a chorus of dread that reverberates through time, growing louder with each soul it claims. I was 32 then, a man forged by practicality rather than passion. The Ouachita was my tether, a vast, rolling expanse of pine and oak, its ridges sharp against the sky, its valleys cloaked in mist at dawn. I'd grown up in a small Arkansas town, where the horizon was flat and the future flatter, and found purpose in places that pushed back. The ranger gig wasn't a dream. It was a necessity, a way to pay bills after a stint in construction left my hands calloused and my patience thin. It came with a battered pickup that groaned to life on good days, a mutt named Rusty whose tail thumped like a metronome, and access to streams where trout flashed silver in the current. The job was simple. Patrol trails, rescue lost hikers, chase off poachers who thought the forest was a free-for-all. Most days it was peaceful, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones, a rhythm I'd come to rely on. Evelyn Hodge, my partner, was the other half of that rhythm. 52, gray hair pulled tight, her wit as sharp as the knife she kept on her belt. She'd been at it longer than me, her quick draw a barroom legend, her laughter a rare burst of warmth in the station's fluorescent gloom. Together we were steady, a team that could handle whatever the woods threw at us, or so I thought. That morning in May 2012 broke with a deceptive calm. I rolled into the ranger station at 6, the air crisp with the scent of wet earth and blooming dogwood, the sky a pale wash of gray promising nothing but time. The coffee was sludge, bitter, grainy, a punishment I endured while flipping through the day's assignments. Evelyn was already there, perched on a stool, her boots tapping a restless beat against the counter. "You look like hell," she said, smirking as I rubbed sleep from my eyes. "Feel like it too," I shot back, pouring another cup. The call crackled through at 7:30, slicing the morning's haze like a blade. Campers near Devil's Canyon had stumbled out at dawn, faces drained of color, voices trembling as they reported screams. Raw, guttural, not the yelp of a twisted ankle but a sound of uncomprehending terror, echoing from the forest's heart the night before. One, a wiry kid with a beard too patchy to take seriously, swore he'd seen something big weaving through the trees, a shape too swift to pin down. Evelyn arched an eyebrow, her skepticism a familiar shield. "Another mountain lion scare?" she asked, tying back her hair as I shrugged on my gear. "Jacket, radio rifle. Maybe," I said, buckling my belt, "or some jackass playing games. Either way, we're up." Devil's Canyon wasn't a postcard spot. It was a gash in the Ouachita's green flesh, cliffs of weathered stone looming over a tangle of roots and mud, its trails a slog after the week's rains turned the earth to a sucking mire. By the time we reached its edge, my boots were caked, heavy as lead, and Evelyn was muttering curses about her knees, her breath puffing in the chill. The forest had a pulse, birds trilling, insects buzzing, squirrels chattering as they darted through the underbrush. But as we descended into the canyon, that pulse faltered, then died. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, deliberate, a weight pressing against my ears, my chest, a vacuum where life should have throbbed. Evelyn noticed it too, her chatter fading, her hand brushing the radio at her belt. "Something's off," she said, her voice low, eyes scanning the trees. I nodded, words sticking in my throat like damp cotton. Then the smell hit, a wave of rot, thick and cloying, like roadkill left to bake under an August sun, but laced with something fouler, unnatural. A stench that clawed its way into my lungs and twisted my stomach. Evelyn gagged, yanking a bandana over her nose, her eyes watering as she squinted into the haze. We'd seen death, deer shredded by coyotes, raccoons flattened on backroads. But this was heavier, a presence that lingered in the air, daring us to name it. The campsite came into view like a wound laid bare. Tents hung in tatters, their nylon skins flayed open. Poles snapped and twisted as if by a child's tantrum grown monstrous. Gear littered the ground, backpacks torn apart, sleeping bags spilling their guts, a cooler overturned, its contents scattered across the dirt in a mockery of a feast, untouched by scavengers. Blood streaked the rocks, pooled in dark, glistening patches, more than a scrape, more than a fight, a slaughter's aftermath. Evelyn swore under her breath, her voice steady but her hand hovering near her pistol's grip. "No way a mountain lion did this," she said, her gaze darting across the wreckage, searching for sense in the chaos. "You seeing any bodies?" I shook my head, my own eyes tracing the scene. Shattered camp chairs, a flashlight crushed underfoot, a single hiking boot lying forlornly in the mud. "Footprints either," I added, my voice flat. "Just this." We moved like hunters or prey, slow and deliberate, boots sinking into the softened earth, rifles loose but ready. Claw marks gouged the rocks, too wide, too deep for a bear, too precise for a cat, their edges sharp as if carved by a blade rather than torn by nature. Evelyn crouched by a tent, lifting a shredded flap with the tip of her baton, her breath catching as she peered inside. "Carter, come here." I stepped closer, the air growing colder, heavier, as if the forest itself recoiled from what lay within. It was a man or fragments of one, a hand, fingers curled in a final, futile grasp at life, a leg, muscle peeled from bone in ragged strips, the rest gone, not eaten, not buried, just absent. It was as if something had ripped him apart with surgical intent and discarded what it didn't crave, leaving a tableau of ruin that mocked our understanding. Evelyn stood fast, wiping her hands on her pants as if she'd touched something profane, her bandana slipping to reveal a grimace. "We need to call this in," she said, her tone clipped urgent. I grabbed my radio, thumbing the button, but static hissed back, a mocking wall of white noise. I adjusted the channel, tapped the side, cursed under my breath. Nothing. Evelyn's face tightened, her jaw clenching. Great, no signal. We hiked back to the truck, get a stronger one. We turned back, retracing our steps, but the forest had shifted. A labyrinth twisting against us, paths we'd walked 100 times bending into dead ends, trees looming denser, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. The rot stench followed, stronger now, coating our clothes, our skin, a shadow we couldn't shake. Then we heard it. A low, resonant sound. Not quite a growl. Not human. A vibration that rolled through the canyon's stone walls and sank into my bones. The hairs on my neck stood rigid. Evelyn's hand snapped to her pistol, her eyes wide but steady. "What the hell was that?" she whispered, her voice a thread in the silence. I couldn't answer. My gaze locked on the tree line ahead, where shadows thickened. Something moved, too big for a man, too swift for a bear. A flicker of motion vanishing before I could raise my rifle. "We need to go," I said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. "Now." She didn't argue. We quickened our pace, boots slipping in the mud, but the forest resisted, every turn dragging us deeper into its grasp, the air growing colder, the smell a suffocating shroud. We stumbled into a small clearing, the ground uneven beneath us, and that's when it stepped out. A nightmare forged from flesh that didn't belong. 7 feet tall, its body lean and angular, arms dangling too long, legs bent at angles that defied bone. Its skin pale and patchy, stretched taut over sinew like a coyote twisted by a cruel, unseen hand. Its head cocked, a bird-like tilt, studying us with sunken slits that glinted faintly in the dim light. Eyes, or something worse, a predator's curiosity pinned to us like specimens. Evelyn swore, her pistol rising in a fluid arc. The thing tilted its head further, a parody of interest, then lunged, too fast, a blur of malice and muscle. She fired, the crack splitting the silence, a bullet tearing through its flesh, dark liquid spattering the ground. But it didn't stop. It swatted her aside with one grotesque arm, sending her crashing into a pine with a sickening thud, her body crumpling like a rag doll. She didn't rise, didn't groan. Only silence answered where her voice should have been. I fired my rifle, the shots deafening in the stillness, each one jerking its frame, dark fluid oozing from wounds that didn't slow it. It turned on me, claws slashing through the air where my head had been a heartbeat before, the rush of wind cold against my skin. I didn't think, just moved, stumbling back, reloading as I ran, the forest a blur of green and gray. Its pursuit shook the earth, heavy steps closing the gap, a hunter savoring the chase. I scrambled up a low ridge of rocks, the only cover in sight, my hands bleeding from jagged edges I didn't feel, my breath ragged in my chest. From below, it circled, its wounds knitting shut with a wet, sucking sound, flesh folding over itself, a grotesque mockery of healing. My stomach churned while rising, as it tilted its head upward, watching me with that cold, assessing gaze, then turned and retreated into the trees, its movements unervingly smooth, almost graceful, a promise of return woven into its stride. I stayed on that ridge for hours, rifle clutched tight, hands trembling, the forest silence a weight pressing me down. When I finally dared to move, the light was fading, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the ground. I found Evelyn on the way back, or what was left of her. Not eaten, but dissected, methodical, her chest split open, ribs splayed, her pistol still in her hand, its magazine empty, a futile defiance etched in her final grip. Her eyes stared skyward, wide and unseeing, a question frozen there I couldn't answer. I took her gun, my rifle dry, and staggered back to the station, my voice barely a rasp as I spilled the story to the sheriff. He called it a bear attack, even after seeing the site. Tracks too strange, too shallow, pieces scattered in patterns no animal would bother with. Devil's Canyon's closed now, officially for unstable terrain. But the locals know better. They whisper of a shadow that walks when the moon hides, a hunter older than the trails we've carved. Its name lost to time, but its hunger eternal. I still work the forest. Someone has to, but I steer clear of that hollow, knowing it waits, patient, its claws tapping the earth for the next soul to wander too close. But my descent into Devil's Canyon is merely one note in a symphony of terror resonating across America's wild places. A prelude to a chorus of voices echoing the same dread from forests vast and shadowed. Others have crossed paths with this hunger, their accounts mirroring mine with chilling precision, each a shard of a fractured nightmare that spans decades and terrains, human and inhuman alike. Let's unravel these threads, peel back the layers of their terror, and peer into the desks where the unseen stalks. Aidan Polworth, in Georgia's Okefenokee Swamp in 2017, sought Mark Sills, a hiker lost near the East Perimeter. A labyrinth of cypress knees and Spanish moss where the air hangs thick with humidity and the promise of secrets. Aidan, 5 years a ranger, was a man of the swamp's edges, comfortable with its gators and wild hogs. His .38 revolver a practical companion. A mid-morning call from Margie at the visitor center sent him trudging through the mire. Mark's friends, Boston tourists lured by the swamp's eerie beauty, said he'd wandered off the trail for a real adventure. By noon, Aidan found a boot half sunk in mud, its laces trailing like veins, then a torn green jacket snagged on a branch, its fabric ripped with force. Deeper in, Mark lay sprawled face down in crimson-tinged water, his body twisted, back scored with gashes too clean, too precise for a gator or bear. A predator's art, not nature's chaos. The swamp's silence was unnatural, a void pressing against his ears, broken by a deliberate splash. A gaunt, gray-skinned thing emerged, limbs too long, joints bending awkwardly, its flat face a torn open maw of teeth, its high-pitched clicking a cicada's scream warped into menace. Aiden fired, wounding its shoulder, but it scrambled back into the water, leaving ripples and a clearing of bones. Human, some fresh with sinew, others bleached by time, a watch, a child's shoe. A ledger of kills spanning decades. Brent Malvin, in Wisconsin's Chequamegon-Nicolet National Forest in 2020, investigated metallic noises near Copperhead Ridge, a rugged stretch of pine and birch he'd patrolled for 5 years. A noon call from Jill, another ranger, sent him off route. Hikers had reported a high-pitched scraping, like a broken wind chime in a storm. The forest hummed with life, birds chirping, leaves rustling, until he reached the ridge, where silence fell like a curtain. A loud snap, a branch breaking sharp, stopped him. Then the metallic sound whispered through the trees, deliberate, unnatural. In a clearing, he found shredded tents hanging like flayed skins, sleeping bags torn, human bones scattered, flesh still clinging in wet clumps. A 6-foot creature, patchy fur, claws like jagged metal, an elongated skull with uneven teeth, charged, its screech vibrating his chest. Brent's .357 Magnum hit its shoulder, then chest, dark blood oozing, but it retreated, taking Curtis, a fellow ranger, days later. His severed arm washing up in a creek, gashes chewing the bone, tracks like spiked gouges mocking their search. Reuben Klein, in North Carolina's Pisgah National Forest in 2008, found a deer eviscerated on Black Balsam Trail, its ribs exposed with surgical precision. 11 years a ranger, he'd seen coyote kills, bear maulings. This was neither. A raccoon strung up followed, its chest flayed, blood staining the bark. The forest silence a warning he pressed past. A hunched, furred thing with empty sockets, voids where eyes should have been. Attacked, its jerky grace killing a hiker before Reuben's machete sliced its arm, a flare igniting its fur. Tunnels beneath held bones and matted fur. A network of death he couldn't unsee, its recycling system a grim jest. Cade Fletcher, in Nevada's Great Basin National Park in 2013, tracked a panicked camper's report near Wheeler Peak, a remote ridge where desert meets pine. Martin Relman's tent was slashed from within, tracks dragging to a grove where his shredded body lay, ribs splayed, face frozen in terror. A gray, canine-like horror with jagged teeth lunged, Cade's Glock wounding it, revealing a cave of skulls. Human, animal, a child's backpack, a shrine of slaughter. His knife ended its shriek, but its body vanished, leaving dark fluid and unanswered dread. Nathan Croft, in Michigan's Black River National Park in 2019, searched for Sam Langley on Hollow Creek Trail, 8 years of ranger work steadying his nerves. Torn gear and claw marks led to Sam's scattered remains, a spindly, leathery creature with a wolfish snout toying with them, its metallic scraping a taunt. A flare startled it, its warped grace retreating after driving them to a rocky dead end. Emery Dietrich, in Montana's Bitterroot National Forest in 2003, investigated a ravaged campsite, tents torn, bodies shredded, grooves like dragged weight marking the earth. A gray, antlered thing with claws tore through 3, its shriek metal on metal. Emery's rifle and knife felled it in a bone-strewn den, its broken antler a relic of a fight it didn't survive. Or did it, vanishing into the wild's depths? These tales, spanning years, forests, and forms, converge on a shared dread. Something hunts with intent, its tracks, claws, and absence is a testament to its dominion, a hunger woven into the earth's deep depths. Let's linger on Washita, where my unraveling began, and excavate its layers until the bone shows. Devil's Canyon isn't a name. It's a scar, a jagged rift in the forest's green hide, its cliffs thrusting upward like the ribs of a beast too vast to bury. That May morning, the air was damp with the aftermath of rain, the scent of wet pine and dogwood a fleeting comfort against the silence. A silence so thick it pressed against my skull, a warning I dismissed as fatigue. The forest's pulse, birds trilling, squirrels chattering, had died, leaving a void that echoed in my chest. A stillness that wasn't peace but anticipation. The smell came next. Rot, yes, but more, a cloying mix of decayed flesh and something acrid, unnatural. A stench that clung to my throat, my skin, a herald of what waited ahead. The campsite was a slaughterhouse laid bare. Tents flayed open, their nylon skins hanging like peeled flesh, poles snapped with a violence that spoke of rage or glee. Gear littered the ground, backpacks torn apart, their contents spilling in chaotic arcs, a cooler crushed inward as if by a fist, its food untouched, a rejection of hunger as we know it. Blood streaked the rocks, pooled in dark, glistening patches, its copper tang sharp in the air, a volume that whispered of more than one victim, though only one remained. Claw marks gouged the stone. Too wide, too deep, their edges precise, a craftsman's work turned savage. Evelyn's voice cut through my daze, steady but taut. No way a mountain lion did this. Her eyes, sharp behind her bandana, traced the wreckage, seeking answers where none fit. Inside the tent, the man's fragments weren't just torn. They were curated, a hand poised as if reaching, a leg stripped to bone. The rest vanished into the forest's maw, a puzzle missing pieces we'd never find. Evelyn's reaction, wiping her hands, her grimace, was a mirror to my own revulsion, a shared recognition of something profane. The creature's emergence was a violation of reality. 7 feet of warped flesh, its body lean yet heavy with menace, arms dangling like twisted vines, legs bent at angles that mocked anatomy. Its skin, pale and patchy, stretched taut over sinew, mottled with dust and shadow, a coyote reshaped by a nightmare's hand. Its head tilted, bird-like, curious, its sunken slits glinting with a light that wasn't reflection but something internal, alive, pinning us as prey. Evelyn's shot tore its flesh, dark liquid spattering, but it swatted her aside with a casual brutality, her body breaking against that tree, her silence a wound deeper than the blood. My rifle's roar jerked its frame, wounds oozing, but it healed, flesh sucking shut, a grotesque defiance of mortality. Its retreat was no surrender, a smooth, graceful stride into the trees, a promise etched in its wake. Evelyn's remains weren't just a loss. They were a message, her chest split, ribs splayed, dissected with cold intent, her pistol's empty click a futile stand against the inevitable. The sheriff's bare attack was a coward's lie. The tracks, elongated, shallow, spoke of something older, something that claimed Devil's Canyon as its own, its blood patterns a map of intent. Locals whisper of a shadow that walks moonless nights, a hunter of trespassers, its hunger a thread woven through Paiute tales and settler fears, a name lost but a presence eternal. I carry her memory, her blood a stain I can't scrub, the tapping of claws on my dreams a summons I dread to answer. Now, let's excavate the others, each a prism refracting the same dread, their stories a chorus building a multidimensional portrait of the unseen. Aiden's Okefenokee in 2017 turned silent before Mark's body appeared, the swamp's muggy air a shroud for its stillness. His boot, then jacket led to a twisted form, gashes too precise, water red with his end. The gray things clicking, a cicada's scream warped, pierced the void, its shoulder bleeding under Aiden's shot, retreating to a bone pile, skulls, a child's shoe, a ledger of kills spanning generations. Brent's Chequamegon Nicolay in 2020 began with metallic scrapes, the forest's hum dying as he reached Copperhead Ridge, a clearing of shredded tents and bones, flesh clinging wet, met a creature with metal claws, its screech a chest-thumping curse. Shots slowed it, but Curtis's arm, tracks like spiked gouges, marked its wrath, a hunter mocking their pursuit. Reuben's Pisgah in 2008 started with a deer's surgical ruin, then a raccoon strung high, the forest's silence a trap. The furred thing's empty sockets, voids of intent, killed a hiker, Reuben's flare igniting its fur, revealing tunnels of bones, a recycling system of death beneath the earth. Cade's Great Basin in 2013 found Martin's tent slashed from within, tracks dragging to a grove of blood and ruin. The canine horror's teeth gleamed, its cave a skull-lined shrine, Cade's knife ending its shriek, though its absence left dark fluid and dread. Nathan's Black River in 2019 traced Sam's gear to a claw-marked clearing, the leathery thing's snout twitching as it toyed with them. The flare's light showed its warped grace. Its pursued a game until they escaped a rocky dead end. Emery's Bitterroot in 2003 uncovered a campsite's chaos, the antlered thing's claws tearing flesh with glee. Its den of bones and its final shriek marked a fight Emery won. Barely. Its broken antler a relic of survival, its vanishing a question unanswered. What binds these horrors into a shuddering tapestry? Silence. Too deep, too sudden before the strike. A stillness that chokes the air. A prelude to the unseen. Tracks too long, claw marks too precise, bodies too absent or curated. They weave a pattern of intent, a signature of dominion. Folklore grasps Wendigo, Skinwalker, forest demon, but names falter. Is it one entity, shape-shifting across desks, or a legion, hidden in nature's crevices, each a sentinel of its domain? Science stumbles, tracks anomalous, wounds inconclusive, but the wild knows. It's a crucible, birthing these things. Its roots deeper than our trails, older than our stories. A pulse in the earth that beats with their hunger. Interactive question. Have you ever stood in a silence so thick it felt alive? The air heavy with unseen eyes, the world holding its breath? Could you linger, knowing what might step from the shadows? Or would you run before it claims you? The evidence is scattered but undeniable. Bones in caves, tracks in mud, blood in patterns, scars on flesh and earth, relics like antlers and claws. Reports lie, bears, cougars, but survivors' eyes betray the truth, their voices trembling with a certainty no lab can quantify. These aren't beasts. They're hunters, curses, relics, territorial, vengeful, eternal. Their hunger a thread through time, a claim staked in the wild's deep desks. I keep Evelyn's memory, her blood a stain I can't wash away, her scream a note in a song that never ends. Others bear their relics, Aiden's bones, Brent's tracks, Reuben's tunnels, Cade's skulls, Nathan's flare, Emery's antler. A brotherhood forged in dread, bound by what we've seen, what we can't unsee. Interactive question. If you found a relic, a claw in the dirt, a bone half buried, an antler snapped in the dusk, would you clutch it as proof of the unseen, a talisman against denial, or bury it deep to escape its gaze, praying it doesn't follow you home? The forest is vast, Washita, Okefenokee, Chequamegon-Nicolet, Pisgah, Great Basin, Black River, Bitterroot. Its desks deep, its hunger eternal. Next time you walk its trails, listen for the silence that isn't empty. Feel the weight that isn't wind. Watch for tracks too long, claw marks too deep. Turn back, because out there, something waits. Older than us, woven into the earth, its hunger a pulse that never fades, and it doesn't want us to leave.